Hello, beautiful people, and welcome, to Stygian Onslaught. The third iteration of Stygian Onslaught is here, and I hope you've got some Notcry characters, buddy. Yeah, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, there's definitely a massive bit of shilling going on here. We have the Aeonblight Drake, Battle-Scarred Rock Crab, and that's too many words. Drake Crab Guy. The Aeonblight Drake favors multi-element damage. The way that it does that is when it gets to specific HP thresholds, which are at 75, 50, and 25%, it gets incredibly increased elemental resistance to the element that did the most damage. And you cannot cancel that attack. In other words, he's got a health bar going. It's not visually like that, but it's in the background. It's split in four sections. For this first section, there's basically nothing. Let's say you're playing a Neuvillette Skirk team, which is one of the teams that is pretty good here. And during that first phase, you deal about 40% Hydro, 60% Cryo. It looks at all the damage you dealt. It looks at the biggest one, and it gets increased resistance to that element for the next one. So here, if you try to hit it with Cryo, it does basically nothing. And then once you get it to 50% HP, it does the same thing based on the previous one. So you'll have done a lot of Hydro damage and a tiny little bit of Cryo. So now it gets Hydro resistance. And then it's the other way around. A lot of Cryo, tiny little bit of Hydro. And then for the last one, same thing. However, there is something that's pretty important here, which is it does not get its resistances instantly. When you get it to 75% HP, it has a stagger animation, as if you had hit one of its weak points against a normal Aeonblight Drake, and after 3-4 seconds, then it gets the resistance. What that means is, again, let's say we're on that Skirk Neuvillette team. You do a rotation where you do normal attacks on Skirk at the start because you don't have any of your bursts in Neuvillette. Neuvillette teams don't love not having bursts at the start, whereas Skirk doesn't get punished as much. So anyways, you do a rotation, you get your cryo damage on Skirk with normal attacks, and then you do a few charge attacks on Neuvillette. You want to stop at 76, 77, 78-ish percent HP. Then do another setup, and after that, do a Skirk burst. That Skirk burst is going to go past 75, and it's going to deal damage before the Drake gets its resistances. And that's going to create a scenario where instead of having to deal 25% of the Drake's HP with Neuvillette, you'll only have to deal 15-ish, or maybe even less. Basically, what that means is that you don't need to have a team that is able to get a lot of damage on each of its elements when you have characters that can kind of nuke a little bit. Because of that, you can actually do just normal Skirk teams with a character like Yelan, or even a character like Molani. Do your setup, and then just try to deal with the 10 to 15% HP to the next threshold, just with on-field Yelan or something like this. One thing to keep in mind for this, try to pay attention to its current HP, and the 75% breakpoint is around the A in the FAF of his name, and the 25% breakpoint is around the R of Perpetual. So if you notice, oh, I have his HP right below the F right now, I'm gonna stop my rotation, do my setup, and do the Skirk burst now, or do the Malika burst now, or do the whatever burst now. One thing that I think a lot of people are gonna, or one trap actually, that I think a lot of people are gonna fall into is thinking that Chaska's good here. Chaska's not awful, it's clearable with Chaska. But with Chaska, what's effectively gonna happen is you're basically guaranteed you do full damage for this one, just like every team, but then for all of the remaining ones, you lose a third of your DPS. So you're always at 66% of your default Chaska team DPS, which is not that high to begin with. You compare that to a Veressa team, for example, that doesn't have 3 different types of damage, only 2, and honestly, a lot more Electro than Pyro. But in a Veressa team, well, because Veressa is just outright better, and because you can front load a good amount of damage with a Malika burst into a little bit of spin, what you can do is you can effectively use Veressa, make sure that you're during your uptime with a bunch of energy when it's just above 75, and do 2 or 3 additional plunges, and then 1 Malika burst plus a full spin until the Chivalrous Shred has expired is generally enough to get you to the next breakpoint. The Drake in Abyss and in Overworld eventually flies up. In Abyss is the first attack it does, in Overworld it's after a while. In Stygian Onslaught, it doesn't. The reason for that is because technically it has the same fly up mechanic as the Overworld version, which is after 40 seconds, 50 seconds. It flies up up, we'll just take a look at it. But the timer gets reset to 0 every time you get it to a breakpoint, which means if you have enough damage to kill it, well, you need to get to the 4 breakpoints, right? 75, 50, 25, and 0 before the timer's over. So that's 30 seconds per breakpoint, so he'll just never fly. Yeah, there you go. Right? It takes like almost 50 seconds. If you don't get it to a breakpoint within 50 seconds, you don't have the DPS to clear anyways. So the fly mechanic is basically completely irrelevant, and you don't need to bring a bow user to shoot it down. I believe that on lower difficulty, it works the same way as it does in Abyss, so he flies up at the start, but it is what it is. Anyways, generally what you want to do is you want to play carries where one of their supports can kind of just brute force a decent amount of damage. Carries that use Malwika as one of their supports, or carries that can work in freeze themes with Skirk, carries that can slot in Wolani as a Hydro option. That's like the main stuff. You can also clear it with Hyper Bloom. You can clear it with the Chaska, right? Teams where you don't really have supports that can be converted to pseudo carries during the specific thresholds, but instead you just always have like almost a 50-50 split, or like 33-33-33 split between multiple different types of elemental damage. That also works, but you need much higher DPS with those teams than with the teams that are more focused on one elemental type, but that can do a second one instead. Because generally the game is balanced where if a team does 110k DPS and it's 50-50, well, when one of those 50 gets completely negated, they do like 55k DPS. If a team is like 110k DPS and it's mainly electro damage like Veressa, well, without the pyro damage, it's like 90k. But when you're against the electro-resistant phase, you just don't go to Veressa. You spin on Malwika, and that's still like 75k. And so you end up with more DPS on both of the different phases than the team that had split damage to begin with, even if both started the same 110k. That's why characters like Chaska aren't quite as good against the Aeonblight Drake. Now, they can still work, like I said, but my Chaska, which is like an okay build, it's not the best, but it's not awful either. She gets to the DPS breakpoint, but I don't have a lot of wiggle room. Anyways, next boss, the Crab. You kind of can't do this without Dendro or Hydro, or without Dendro and Hydro on your team. The reality is that if you don't have Llama, you don't have Nahida, you're kind of just cooked. Is it technically clearable without it? Probably. Are you gonna hate your life? Yeah. That being said, if you have either Nahida or Llama, this isn't too difficult. Nahida can do Fearless Crab. Llama can actually do Dire Crab at C0 or 0 with only 4-star supports. Just play Hyper Bloom or Nilo Bloom if you have Nilo, but Nilo's not necessary at all. If you don't have Nahida or Llama, honestly, I'm still not entirely sure what you're supposed to do.
The next day.
So, we did it. Managed to do the Crab without any limited or standard 5 stars, right? We got Traveler, but that doesn't fucking count. This was very painful. So, it is possible to do this without Nahida or Llama, but it is very, very RNG dependent. You need to get really good directional RNG. When you trigger Bloom, it creates a Dendro Core, but it doesn't create a Dendro Core under the enemy. It creates a Dendro Core in a random direction around the enemy, or in a random direction around the spot where you trigger the reaction. There's a lot of RNG involved, basically, and in order to actually have the DPS to clear this in time, you need to get good RNG. So it was very painful. I don't recommend doing this, but it is technically doable.
Rain outlines your fate. Scatter. Our bond is strong. Just like we rehearsed. Body and brain cutter.
Oh, that's fucking insane. Oh, but our energy's not the best, though.
Rain outlines your fate. Witness it.
Oh, we're vibing, bro. Bro, we have 8 seconds to spare. What the f? We got insane RNG. The first thing that the Crab does is it spawns some seeds around you. There's a few things you can do for that. And in order to break the seeds, you have to deal bloom damage to them.
Quietly now.
Once you've broken 6 seeds, his shield gets broken, and he falls down. After that,
Gotcha. Committed to memory.
he just does random attacks and keeps spawning more seeds. And you can break those seeds to send them as basically like boosted hyper blooms. If you deal bloom damage to these things, they will fly towards the crab, and they will deal damage to the crab based on the amount of damage your bloom reaction did to them. And it multiplies it by 500%, up to 1.5 million. But yeah, basically triggering bloom or hyper bloom on those, it does a lot of damage. If you have Llama at the start, if you stand directly under the boss and you hold E, and like in the middle, your hold E, because it's Lunar Bloom damage, will hit all of the seeds. And then if you hold E against the other seeds later, you get to Lunar Bloom them and throw a bunch of damage at it. My Llama build is a little not very strong. So the transferred damage is only at 147k here, 117k here, 40k there, because that was just from a normal bloom. It's not that high. And finally, we've got the guy, the Fatui. This boss is a bit less chill than this one, but it's also a lot tankier. This boss in difficulty 5 has almost as much HP as Cactus in difficulty 6. The first thing he does is he shields up. When it's shielded, you can't proc Fav, so you want to proc your Favs at the very start before he gets his shield. And then you need to deal damage to the shield to break it. The problem is that by default, the shield heals, and it heals a lot. It heals really quickly. You can pause, it's not exactly pause, but you can significantly slow down the shield's restoration effect by having triggered Electrocharge on the shield, or on him, recently. And Electrocharge damage and Lunar Charge damage gets significantly increased against the shield on top of that. So getting through the shield on an Electrocharge team is generally not much of a problem. Right, as you can see, right? Even with no like supports deployed, we can still get through it. On the other hand, if you're using a team that doesn't have Electrocharge, especially if it's not Electro, I'll explain that in a second. We got past the first one, let's go! There's 3, by the way. We got past the second one, let's go! Oh. We did not get past the rest. And now we die. The amount of DPS required to get through the shields is really high. On top of that, the shield prevents you from getting reaction damage. In other words, you're not melting with Maweka.
Everybody stand. Get him. Pyroclastic surge.
Right, you triggered melt, but as you can see, we did not do more damage than when we were playing the Monopyro team. If anything, we're doing less. Why are we doing so much less? Well, that's because this guy, during the shield, has 70% resistance to everything except Electro, which means 20% more shred from Kazuha actually makes a big difference. Basically, you have 3 options. Option number 1, play an Electrocharge team. What's the downside? Well, there's not that many Electrocharge teams that just outright have enough DPS to kill this guy within 2 minutes. Option number 2, play an Electro Carry, because Electro Carries can get through the shield pretty easily, just because it isn't incredibly tanky. I say easily, it's not that easy, it still requires very high investment, but, you know, it's doable at the very least.
Light it up. Stop right there. Quick as a flash.
There we go.
Okay, now kablam.
So, my Versa can get through, oops. The because my Barista build is quite good. Get through the first 2 shields on the first rotation. Set up the second rotation. Get through the third shield. And then you just have fun with this. My versatility is very good though. So if you are a Versa player and you aren't able to get to those thresholds in time, remember, Bennett might actually be a better option than Maoika for you, because it has high pyro resistance, so the Maoika damage isn't, well, it's not fully going through. Whereas a Bennett buff to your electro damage does go through. Anyways, that's your second option. Your third option is what you do if you don't have the electro carries, and it's you try to brute force it. As far as I've seen, the only character that is able to brute force this is Kirk at C0 or 0. Because other teams rely too much on reaction damage, or on Fav procs, or on things that don't work against the shield, basically. With Skirk, you can get past the first shield without your bursts on the rest of the team, and 2 rotations worth of setups gives you your bursts, even if your second rotation doesn't get Fav procs. Anyways. So Skirk can get past the first shield on the first rotation. And then the second rotation that has the bursts can get past the remaining 2 shields. And once you're past this, it's not too much of a problem. Oops, I f***ed up. That is not how you're supposed to do that team's rotations. It's fine. Also, once the shield is over, this guy can be frozen. Oopsie. If you don't freeze it, he will do a shield phase again towards the end. Whereas if you do freeze it, you can prevent the second shield phase from happening. Which is another reason why Skirk is good at brute forcing it. Also, something that I would recommend, because the shield makes things very cringe, except that your team is just Skirk doing the damage, put the ER Sands in the bag. That's what I've been doing, putting everyone on an ER Sands to make things more straightforward. I haven't yet seen a clear done without either an Electro Carry or Inefa or Skirk. I hope people will find other alternatives for this, because honestly, things are not looking too hot. I think it's doable with Nivedette, but my Nivedette is not good enough to do it. That's for sure. So far, the Stygian Onslaught is... I don't really know how to feel about it. On one hand, difficulty 5 rewards are not primos, so even if it's like Omega chill and like Omega restricted to the new units, people that can't clear it, at least they're not missing out on primos. Like, it still feels like shit to miss out on the Just on Enlightenment, but it feels worse than it actually is. Also, you can get the difficulty 4 rewards from co-op, so really all you're missing out on is 1 Dust, 100,000 Mora, and 5 Heroes Wits. So it's not that big of a deal. So like, if you don't like any of the characters that were released recently, any of the characters that are getting shilled for this, remind yourself, if you can't clear Fearless, you're not missing out on much. In any case, what I will say is I really like the Aeonblight Drake. I think that this is the sort of boss mechanic that is actually fun to interact with and to build teams around. And honestly, I wouldn't hate this if the shield was just a little bit squishier. As usual, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learn a thing or two. Have fun with the Stygian Onslaught, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.